I don't know what I expected when my father sent me to help out at the old family inn for the summer. Maybe a little boredom, a little peace. Definitely not her. The place smelled of polish and rain. It was the kind of quiet you could almost hear, dripping pipes, soft footsteps in the hallway, the distant hum of an old ceiling fan. I'd been fixing a stuck window in one of the guest rooms when I first heard her voice behind me. Low, calm, the kind of tone that made you turn before you realized why. "You still use the wrong screwdriver for those," she said. I looked over my shoulder. She stood by the door, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled to her elbows. My cousin, technically. My mother's side. I'd met her years ago at a funeral, when I was still half a kid. Back then she'd seemed untouchable, a blur of dark eyes and poise. Now, up close, she looked more real. A few silver strands near her temple. A tiredness that wasn't weakness, just lived in. "You remember me?" I asked, straightening up, embarrassed by the way my palms suddenly felt sweaty against the metal handle. "Of course." She smiled, small, precise. "You were the one who spilled orange juice on my shoes." That made me laugh, the kind of awkward, throat-tight laugh that sounds more like an apology. She crossed the room, her hand brushing the edge of the window frame beside mine. "You don't have to do all this alone," she said. "The latch just needs patience, not force." The way she said it, patience, not force, made it sound like more than advice about a window. I stepped back. She leaned in, fingers working the mechanism with quiet focus. Her perfume was faint, something citrus and warm. Her wrist brushed mine once, lightly, and neither of us moved for a second too long. The latch clicked. The window opened. "There," she said, turning to face me. Her eyes lingered, curious, as if she wanted to read what was behind my silence. "You'll learn." "I'm trying," I said. She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. Trying isn't the same as understanding. That stung a little, though I couldn't tell why. She left the room a moment later, her steps soft but certain, like she carried her own kind of weather with her. I found myself following her out to the hall, pretending I needed another tool. She was checking the guest ledger at the reception desk, the lamplight catching the edges of her hair. "Coffee?" she asked, not looking up. "Sure." We sat in the little kitchen behind the front desk, mismatched mugs, the hum of the refrigerator, the kind of small talk that barely covered the quiet between us. She asked about my classes, my father, the city. I answered too quickly, too carefully. Then she looked up suddenly and said, "You don't have to be polite all the time. You can just be." It was nothing dramatic, just words. But they hit somewhere deep, like she saw the exact part of me I tried to keep invisible. I didn't know what to say. She didn't seem to expect an answer anyway. She poured another cup, slid it across the table, her fingers brushing mine again. That same soft static that made the world narrow for a heartbeat. Outside, thunder rumbled far away. Inside, neither of us spoke. When she finally stood to leave, she said, "Lock up when you're done, okay?" I nodded, watching her walk down the hallway until her shadow disappeared around the corner. The mug was still warm where she'd touched it. That night, I couldn't stop replaying that single moment. Her hand on mine, the window latch clicking open, her voice saying, "You'll learn." And I kept wondering, what exactly was she teaching me? The next morning, the inn was half awake. The smell of brewed coffee, faint rain against the windows, the low hum of a radio playing somewhere behind the counter. I'd come early, trying not to think about why. She was already there, hunched over the reservation book, glasses slipping down her nose. Her hair was tied up again, though a few strands had escaped, brushing against her cheek. I wanted to say something about the weather, or breakfast, or anything, but my voice stayed caught in my throat. "Morning," she said without looking up. "Morning." She handed me a folded list. "The heater in room 3's acting up again. Think you can handle it?" "I'll try," I said, and immediately regretted how eager that sounded. Her mouth curved, just barely. "You always say that." I took the wrench set and headed down the narrow hallway. The floorboards creaked, the smell of old wood and detergent thick in the air. She followed after a moment, carrying a small box of tools, though I hadn't asked her to. When we reached the room, she crouched beside me, holding a flashlight steady while I fiddled with the screws. "Do you ever rest?" I asked, half joking. She gave a small laugh, quiet, low, the kind that seemed to pull something out of her against her will. "Not really my strong suit." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was something else, heavier but softer. I could hear her breathing, even, controlled, like she was trying to make herself smaller in the space between us. "Was this place always yours?" I asked. "It was my mother's," she said, brushing dust off her knee. "I kept it running after she passed. Didn't think I would, but here I am." Her tone was calm, but her hand hesitated at the end of the sentence, just a fraction. Her fingers tightened around the flashlight, and that tiny motion said more than her words. "Guess that's what happens," she murmured. "You stay out of habit." I looked up at her, wanting to say something, anything that didn't sound naive. But her eyes met mine for a second, and it felt like a door closing as soon as it opened. She stood, brushing her palms on her jeans. "You're good at fixing things," she said. "Not everything," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes softened, just a flicker, then turned away. When the heater finally kicked back to life, a soft click and a low hum filled the quiet. She smiled, a real one this time, though it didn't last. "See? Patience," she said again. "I'm learning," I told her. She looked at me for a long moment, as if searching for what kind of learning I meant. Then she nodded once and started toward the door. Halfway out, she paused. "You missed a screw," she said, but her voice wasn't scolding this time. It was almost tender, like she didn't really care about the screw at all. When she left, I found her sweater draped over the chair. It smelled faintly of coffee and lavender. I folded it, meaning to bring it to her, but I didn't. I just sat there for a while, listening to the soft hum of the heater, wondering why the warmth in the room didn't feel like it came from that machine at all. That night the storm came harder than the forecast promised. The inn felt smaller when it rained, ceilings lower, walls closer, the ticking clock louder. Most of the guests had gone to bed early, leaving the lobby dim except for the lamp beside her desk. She was going through receipts, her glasses perched halfway down her nose again. I was supposed to check the fuse box, but the storm had already killed the signal, so I lingered. Maybe too long. "Still awake?" she asked, without looking up. "Couldn't sleep." She pushed her papers aside, rubbing her temples. "Storms do that to me too." Lightning flashed. For a second the whole room glowed white, and when it faded, she was looking straight at me. No smile, no guard, just a quiet kind of exhaustion that made her look younger. "I could make tea," I said. She hesitated, then nodded. "Only if you'll have some too." In the kitchen, the lights flickered. I filled the kettle. She found 2 mugs. We stood side by side, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could smell the faint citrus of her perfume again. "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" I asked. "Every week," she said, soft laughter breaking through the storm's hum. "And yet," she shrugged, "I stay. Because of family? Because of fear, maybe." She said it like she hadn't meant to. The kettle whistled, cutting through the moment before it could breathe too much. When I poured the tea, her hand brushed mine, not by accident this time. Her fingers lingered a heartbeat too long before retreating. We carried our mugs to the small table by the window. The rain made rivers on the glass. She watched them, not me. "You remind me of someone," she said suddenly. "Who?" She hesitated, sipping her tea. "Someone who left before I could tell him he mattered." The words landed between us like something fragile and unfinished. I wanted to ask who, but she looked so still, so far away in that moment that I didn't dare. A phone buzzed on the counter, sharp, loud, wrong in the quiet. She turned quickly, almost guilty. The screen lit her face, Daniel calling. She stared at it, unreadable, then silenced the call without answering. "Bad timing," she said, forcing a small smile. "Always is," I said quietly. Her eyes met mine again, steady this time, searching, like she was waiting for me to flinch or look away. I didn't. The storm rumbled again, closer now. She reached to close the window, but it stuck halfway. I got up to help, both of us tugging at the frame until it gave way with a snap. She stumbled slightly, and I caught her by the shoulders. Instinct, not thought. Her breath caught. My hands stayed where they shouldn't. For a second, the world went completely still except for the rain. She looked up at me, eyes dark and unreadable. "You should get some sleep," she whispered, though her voice wasn't steady. "I'm not tired," I said, and immediately wished I hadn't. Something flickered in her expression, fear, maybe, or recognition. Then she stepped back, putting distance between us that felt heavier than the storm outside. When she left the kitchen, she didn't take her tea. The mug sat between us, steam fading, and I stood there watching it go cold, knowing that whatever almost happened just now wouldn't stay unspoken for long. The rain stopped sometime before dawn, but the air still smelled like wet earth and static. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, the way her shoulders tensed when I caught her, the way she stepped back like she'd touched fire. By morning, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined it all. But when I came downstairs, she was already there, standing by the window, arms folded, looking out at the courtyard as if the world had tilted overnight. "You're up early," I said quietly. She didn't turn, didn't sleep. Her voice was calm, but the space between words carried something heavy. I poured coffee for both of us, though I wasn't sure why. When I handed her the mug, she took it without a thank you, just a small nod, eyes still on the glass. "We should talk," she said after a moment. The words hit harder than I expected. I leaned against the counter, waiting. "This thing," she began, then stopped. "Whatever this energy is between us, it can't keep happening." I almost laughed, but not because it was funny. "You make it sound like we did something." "Didn't we?" she asked softly. "That silence, the kind that stretches until it starts to sound like truth." She finally turned to look at me, and it was worse than I imagined. Her eyes were tired, raw, the kind of tired that doesn't come from sleep. "I'm too old for this kind of mistake," she said. "And you're too young to understand what it would cost." "I understand more than you think." "Do you?" She set her mug down carefully, both hands shaking just enough to make the ceramic clink against the table. "You still believe wanting something makes it right?" I didn't answer. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't right either. "You talk like you've already decided it's wrong," I said. "I have to," she whispered. "Someone has to." Her words trembled in the air like a wire pulled too tight. I wanted to step closer, to tell her it didn't have to mean anything, or maybe that it already did. But she was standing so still, so fragile in her composure, that moving even an inch felt like breaking something sacred. "Why do you look at me that way?" she asked suddenly, eyes searching mine. I swallowed. "I don't know any other way to look at you." She blinked, a slow, pained motion, and turned her gaze to the floor. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why?" "Because I'll start believing them." Her voice cracked on that last word. For a moment, the sound of it filled every empty corner of the room. We stood there, no words, no movement, only the faint clatter of wind against the window. She closed her eyes, exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. "This was supposed to be simple," she murmured. "You were supposed to help for the summer, and then leave." "I know. And yet," she looked up, meeting my eyes again, not with anger, but with something worse, recognition. Neither of us moved. The world outside felt frozen, caught in the same breathless pause that lived between us. Then, almost to herself, she said, "You make me remember what it feels like to want something I shouldn't." She didn't wait for my response. She just walked away, leaving the coffee untouched, her words echoing long after her footsteps were gone. And for the first time, I wished she'd yelled instead of whispered, because silence, I was learning, hurts in ways touch never could. The next few days passed in fragments. Polite greetings, unfinished sentences, doors left half open. She'd built a quiet wall between us, the kind made not of words but of routine. I tried to match her calm, but every time our paths crossed, something in her eyes flickered, like a light trying not to burn. It was Thursday evening when it happened. The rain had cleared, and the air outside smelled like iron and damp soil. She was in the storage room, sorting old boxes, her hair tied up messily, a loose shirt falling off one shoulder. "Need a hand?" I asked from the doorway. She hesitated before answering, then nodded toward a stack of cardboard near the shelf. "Those can go upstairs." We worked in silence for a while, dust in the air, the sound of shifting paper, and the occasional thump of a box being set down. She found something inside one of them, a small wooden frame, the glass cracked. She stared at it for a long time. "Who's that?" I asked before I could stop myself. She didn't answer, just turned the photo slightly toward me. A man in his 30s, smiling at the camera with one arm around her shoulders. They looked easy together. Younger. Unburdened. His name was Arif, she said finally. We were engaged. The words were hung in the air like smoke. I didn't know, I said quietly. No one here does. She set the frame down, her thumb brushing the crack across the glass. He died in a car accident. 14 years ago. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. The silence between us wasn't empty this time. It was full of something fragile, like shared air we were both afraid to disturb. She gave a small laugh, one without joy. You know, you even laugh like him. That same, half-apology kind of sound. I froze. I noticed it the first day you came, she continued, voice barely above a whisper. And I told myself it was coincidence. But then you started staying late, fixing things he used to fix. You wear your sleeves the same way. You even stand the same. I didn't know if she was confessing or punishing herself. I'm not him, I said. I know. Her voice broke slightly. That's what makes it worse. The words sank deep, twisting something in my chest I couldn't name. She wiped her hands on her jeans, eyes glistening but dry. I thought I'd buried that part of me. But you make it surface again, and I don't know if I hate it or miss it. I stepped closer, slow enough for her to stop me if she wanted. She didn't. You don't have to be afraid of remembering, I said. She looked up at me, a single, sharp glance that carried 14 years of grief and something new, trembling at the edges. Then she whispered, almost to herself, You think this is about remembering? The air between us felt electric, trembling with the weight of something neither of us meant to start. Her hand moved, just slightly, as if to touch the photo again, but instead brushed my wrist. A mistake. A question. We both froze. I shouldn't have told you, she said, pulling back. I'm glad you did. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. She just looked at me, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. Not her regret, not her control, but the quiet breaking underneath it all. And in that single, silent second, something irreversible shifted, not in what we did, but in what we finally allowed ourselves to feel. The day after the storm felt too bright, as if the world had no idea what it had done to us. Light spilled through the cracked blinds, dust hanging in the air like something holy. She was in the lounge again, reorganizing ledgers that didn't need it. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, watching the morning slide across her face. She didn't look up when she said, You're leaving soon. It wasn't a question. Next week, I replied. My voice came out quieter than I meant. Good, she said, but the word came out uneven, a half-breath late. She kept flipping pages, but her hand lingered on the same one too long. I crossed the room and sat across from her. The space between us felt smaller than ever. I've been thinking, she said, about what you said the other day, about not being afraid to remember. I waited. It's strange, she went on. For years I thought forgetting was survival. That if I just kept moving, fixing, working, she exhaled softly. But you made me realize I've just been standing still. She looked up finally, and something in her eyes had softened, not in surrender, but in recognition. I didn't mean to remind you of him, I said. You didn't, she said, shaking her head slowly. You reminded me of me. The person I was before I started measuring every feeling by what it could ruin. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, alive. Outside, wind brushed against the window. The faint smell of rain still lingered in the wooden frames. She reached for the ledger, then stopped, her hand hesitating midair. You've been good for this place, she said. You've been good for me. I smiled, but it felt fragile. Then why does it feel like goodbye? Because it has to be, she whispered. That's what makes it real. For a moment, neither of us looked away. Everything between us, all the unspoken wanting, the guilt, the ache, balanced on that gaze like a held breath. Then she stood, slow and deliberate, and came around the table. She didn't touch me at first, just stood close enough for her presence to quiet everything else. "I don't know what this is," she said softly, "but I know it's changed me." Her hand rested lightly on my shoulder. Warm, steady, not an invitation, a truth. I looked up at her. The light caught the silver in her hair, the tired grace of her face, and I realized I didn't need to say anything. She leaned forward. Not a kiss, not quite, just her forehead resting against mine. A small, human gesture that said more than any confession could. We stayed like that, eyes closed, sharing the same breath, the same silence. No promises, no plans. Just the soft, fragile knowing that something had bloomed where neither of us expected it to. When she finally stepped back, she smiled. Small, real, unguarded. "Take care of yourself," she said. "You too." I watched her walk away, sunlight spilling through the open doorway behind her. And for once, I didn't chase after what was leaving, because somehow, in that quiet collapse between us, I knew she'd already given me everything she could. It's been 3 months since I left the inn. The city feels louder now, traffic, voices, life pressing in from all sides. But some nights, when the wind hums low against my window, I still hear the slow creak of her hallway floorboards, the sound of rain on old glass. I didn't think leaving would feel like this. Not tragic, not clean, just unfinished in a quiet kind of way. Like we both closed the book before the last page, afraid of what the ending might have done to us. I still fix things, leaky taps, broken lamps, loose screws. It's funny how much of her advice stuck without trying to. Patience, not force. That line comes back to me more often than I'd admit. She said it about a window latch once, but I think she meant it for life. I didn't see her again after that morning. No phone calls, no long goodbyes. Just a text 2 weeks later. "The heater's working fine now. Hope you are too." I didn't reply. Some things deserve to stay suspended. Not lost, not forgotten, just gently left where they were right. But something shifted in me because of her. Maybe it was the way she carried her loneliness like it was something earned. Or the way she taught me that love, real love, isn't about taking or naming. It's about noticing. About being still enough to see the other person as they are, not as the story you want to write them into. I used to think connection was all about movement. Doing something, saying something, becoming something. She showed me that sometimes it's about stopping long enough to let the moment breathe. I think she was right when she said what we had to end to mean something. Because it still does. Every day, not as regret, not as longing, just as proof that two people can find something beautiful in a place where neither expected to. When I think of her now, it's not the almost touch or the rain-soaked nights that stay with me. It's smaller things, her hands wrapped around a mug, the faint smell of lavender when she passed, the sound of her quiet laughter when she finally let it out. That's the thing about certain people. They don't stay with you, but they stay in you. And if she ever hears this somehow, if these words ever reach that quiet and tucked between the hills, I hope she knows she didn't ruin me. She reminded me how to feel without needing to own what I felt. Maybe that's what love really is. Not a story you finish, but a lesson that keeps unfolding long after you've left the room. So if you've ever met someone who changed you, not with promises, but with presence, tell me in the comments. Or maybe don't. Maybe just think about them for a while, the way I still think about her. Because sometimes that's enough.